Hello, Thomas Crockett. Welcome to my storytelling channel. Here's a story that goes way back to when I was a kid. It's a family legend, a mystery that was never solved. It is titled appropriately, The Mystery of the Missing Leg. Uncle Joey had one leg and half a mind, and each Wednesday he visited our house on 75th Street, eating the peppers and eggs my mother cooked for him. When I got home from school, I sat in the parlor and stared at him, wondering why was his leg missing. So I sought the answer with those whom I believed knew best. My grandmother Susie, one of his older siblings, said when he was a kid he stuck his legs out of their father's car window, and one day a passing truck knocked his leg off. Be careful, she warned me. The same could happen to me if I didn't bring my legs inside my father's car. Uncle Sal told me not to believe her. He was the oldest of the siblings and knew best. He visited every Thursday when my mother cooked pasta fagioli for him. We didn't have a car, he said, and we didn't have a father. He was murdered by the Black Hand in Naples. The real story is that a cop shot off his leg when he stole newspapers before the newsstand opened. Why would he steal newspapers, I asked. To get the gambling results. He couldn't wait for the newsstand to open? No, he said. We're talking about a man who had half a brain, remember. Uncle Sacco, another older brother, told me not to believe anything Sal said because Sal was a liar and a cheat. Here's a guy who was a draft dodger in World War I, he said during one of his Tuesday visits, ripping bread and dipping it into a beef stew my mother made for him. How do you trust someone who continued to put sauerkraut on his frankfurters when it was common for Americans to avoid anything German? He told me only he knew the true story. Joey got venereal disease from a bad prostitute. What's the difference between a bad prostitute and a good prostitute, I asked. I can't tell you that, he said. That's something for you and your mother to discuss when you're older. Sal called Sacco the liar. It was our sister Priska, the eldest, who had the venereal disease. From a bad prostitute? No, a bad soldier. Did she lose her leg? No, she died. And this was long before the cop shot off Joey's leg. Josie, another older sister, disputed her siblings' stories. She said the truth was too horrible for my young ears. I persuaded her that I could handle the truth. I would soon turn 9 years old. Oh, 9 years old, I see. Yes, that makes a big difference, she said during one of her Monday visits to our house, eating the cold cuts, bread, and coleslaw my mother had laid out on the table. She asked me if I knew Joey only had half a brain. I said I did. She said the part of his brain that didn't work made it hard for him to get off at the right subway station. And in New York, it was important to get off at the right station if you wanted to live. One day, Joey wound up in Brownsville on Utica Avenue, in the heart of a neighborhood unfriendly to Italians. When the kids there asked him what he was doing in their neighborhood, he said he thought it was his neighborhood. They were offended by his stupidity. They took his leg because he was stupid? Let that be a lesson to you, she said. Stay in school. My grandmother said her sister's story was preposterous. Kids didn't go around chopping off people's legs in broad daylight, no matter how stupid they were. I told her I was relieved to hear that. She told me to ask my mother to corroborate the story about the truck. My mother said the story of his missing leg started before he was born. It was a story of poverty and ignorance. The story of the Troisi family, minus the not yet born Joey taking a boat from Italy, living in the boat's steerage for 3 weeks, eating garlic and wood chips before landing in Ellis Island, only to learn that their father, who was supposed to be there to sponsor them, was in Boston instead, living with a woman, sleeping in. The government officials took them by the scruffs of their dirty necks, wanting to send them to Montreal. They ran for their lives, suitcases in tow, and lived for a time in the streets among the pigeons and the Irish. What does any of that have to do with the missing leg? I asked. He received bad medical care when he was born, she said, which is what you get when you come from poverty and ignorance. She said it was the hospital's fault, the doctor in particular, who may not have even been a doctor, given that he had an Italian name, and she had never heard of an Italian becoming a doctor. He pulled Joey out of the womb by his legs, not his head, until he realized he was holding Joey's little left leg, while the rest of Joey was still in the womb. By the time the so-called doctor removed the rest of him, Joey's head had been so twisted that only half of his brain worked, and even that part wasn't very good. Asking my older brothers only added to my confusion. My brother Davy, 6 years my senior, said Joey lost his leg taking a bath in scorching hot water. His ligaments, bones, and skin melted. When his mother drained the water, his left leg dissolved down the drain. Miraculously, his right leg was spared. Who told you that? I asked. Grandma. Grandma, what about the truck? What truck? He said. My brother Bob, 2 years older, said Joey lost his leg in a washing machine. One of the kids in his neighborhood of German origin had dared him to stick his legs in it while the machine was spinning. Joey, relying on the part of his brain that didn't work, took on the challenge. He thrust his leg inside the moving machine until his leg was chopped to pieces. Who told you that? I asked. Uncle Sal. But Uncle Sal said a cop shot off Joey's leg. The cop shot his good leg, not the one that's missing. So when Joey stuck his leg in the washing machine, he only had one leg? No, first he got shot in the leg, but Dr. Fagioli, the finest Italian doctor in New York City, was able to take the bullet out without Joey suffering any damage. The washing machine incident came later. Joey wasn't much help resolving the mystery. When I asked him what happened to his leg, he said, "What do you mean?" "Your missing leg," I said. "What missing leg?" he replied. "I have more legs than you, Tommy." He held up his crutches and wanted to know if I could count. That's when I realized the part of his brain that didn't work really didn't work, and the part that did hardly worked at all. When I told Sal on a Thursday what Joey said on a Wednesday, Sal said, "When you're missing a leg and half your brain, you say things like that." When I told Sacco on a Tuesday what Sal said about Joey on a Thursday, Sacco said, "It's not like Sal had a full brain either." When I told Josie on a Monday what her brothers said on a Tuesday and Thursday, she said, "If you added up all their brains, you still wouldn't have a full brain." As time passed, I realized I would never learn the truth about his missing leg. So I stopped asking. What I cared about when he left our house on Wednesdays, moving down the street on his crutches toward the elevated train, was that he would get off at the right station, not somewhere in Brownsville. He couldn't afford to lose his one remaining leg.